Hey guys, Robert here, and I got with me a great comic artist, best known for doing monsters, beautiful women, and barbarians. You name it, he's done it. Thank you for coming on, Aaron Lopresti.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about comics.
Yep. So first, before we go further with any of the books that I wanted to bring up about, let's talk about your campaign, Wrath of the Gods. Is that it, or
Wraith of God.
Race of God? Sorry,
That's
Race
right.
of God. So yeah, just talk a little about it. What's it about, and how long from what I recall on your interview with Nerdette, you've been sitting on this for like 20 years or something.
Yeah, it was originally designed to be a pitch to reimagine the Western Ghost Rider at Marvel
Oh.
that I did in the, probably 97, 98, somewhere in that neighborhood, and
Mm-hmm.
never went anywhere. So I thought, well, I'm going to because I like the story a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and so I reformatted it, redesigned the character. So obviously, it didn't look like Ghost Rider, at
Right.
least.
Of course.
And
We're talking about the old Western Ghost Rider.
right, the
So
old Western Ghost Rider, of course, we're
yep.
talking about. And then kind of let it set, thinking that, well, maybe at some point in my career, I get a chance to do this. And then I would always work on the script a little bit here and there, and get different story ideas and add those,
Mm-hmm.
and finally developed into a full-fledged screenplay. And I've been trying actually to pitch, not a screenplay, but a
Oh, I know.
script.
I know what you mean. A script. I know. Yep.
And so I was talking to a couple of smaller publishers, and I actually even pitched it to Dan DiDio at DC,
Ah.
and we were actually talking about doing it. And but then, of course, things went the way they went at DC,
Right. Right.
and
So it was that close. It was that close to almost agreeing. Was right when he got.
yeah. Well, what had happened was it was less than a year before
Ah.
maybe, yeah, maybe about a year before he got let go. And we were just in the middle of a lot of stuff, and I'd sent it to him, and he read the initial pitch, and he said, yeah, I got some comments, some things that we might be able to do this, but I want you to change a couple things or whatever. I said, all right. But when I was actually talking to him on the phone, and he said, well, but he couldn't find his notes that he'd put on it. He goes, all right, we'll talk about it later. I said, fine. And I was working on something, and he was working on something, and then we just never got around to talking about it again until then of course he was let go, and so
Right.
then there it was. But anyway, it's kind of a combination of a superhero book, a horror book,
Mm-hmm.
a Western adventure. It's got all my favorite genres in there, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, basically what it is I describe the character as kind of a Batman of the Old West, and he has this
Ah.
woman named Esther who is kind of his Alfred, if you will. She's a
Mm-hmm.
former Salvation Army worker who helps him on his quest to wipe out supernatural evil in the land,
Ah.
and those, of course, being monsters like
Mm-hmm.
werewolves. In this particular story, it's werewolves, but vampires, zombies, whatever it might
Right.
be. And he has a very sort of shadowy, checkered past, which we get into in the story, but I don't want to give away
Well,
the
of course.
origin
Of course. You
story.
always got to keep that air of mystery about him.
Right, exactly. And so he has a very tenuous relationship with Esther. She's not exactly sure what she got herself into,
Mm-hmm.
and so she's trying to figure out her way through that as they are pursuing this, I guess, clan of werewolves that are in pursuit of an old retired European monster hunter who has
Ah.
relocated and hiding out in the small town of
Mm-hmm.
Calamity, Arizona. And he has in his possession this amulet that if a werewolf has possession of it, he becomes invincible. So you
Oh.
understand
Oh.
why these werewolves want this.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wraith, of course, is on a mission to stop them from getting it. And so there's some mystery. We don't always know who's who, and um, there's a lot of twists and turns along the way. So that has mystery elements. It has
Mm-hmm.
some supernatural elements to it. It has your typical monster elements and some superhero elements to it. So it has a lot of fun genre type appeal
Right.
to it across a broad range. And it's just something I'm really excited about and glad that I'm finally getting an opportunity to do something with it, because like I said, I've been sitting on it for
Mm-hmm.
20 years, and it's something that I really felt strongly about, or I would have ditched it a long time ago.
Of
So
course, of course. You don't sit because I mean I've had my own fictional universe right up here in my head. I've had a bunch of artists. You actually did a free sketch for me long ago. You probably don't remember that. I could show it later, but it was a very brief sketch though. But I think it was at a Chicago, back when Wizard Chicago was still saying, you were at one of those booths, you know, freezing. But I've had characters in my head up here for so long that I want to get out there one day.
yeah,
But
that's how it is.
Yep. Now, how long of a story do you have? I mean, it's obviously not just the one graphic novel, obviously. Like, how
Well,
long would
no,
you say?
well, this particular one is now, because we've already hit a stretch goal to, what I wanted to do was, I have, like you, I have, you know, the Lopresti verse cooking in my head and a lot of the ideas. I want to expand and do several of my characters. And so I wanted to tie this story, this Wraith of God story, into a modern sort of setting. How does it connect, right, with the rest of my universe, right? And so I've added a 3-page story because we had a stretch goal, or 3-page epilogue, excuse me, not a story, but an epilogue that sort of ties things in. And I think it's really kind of you know, it's like one of those wow moments. And so it'll be real fun to add on. So right now it's a 75-page graphic novel, but it just takes us basically through the origin of the Wraith, this particular adventure, his, you know, we define the relationship between him and Esther. And so it ends in a spot where we could go forward with more stories. And I actually have more stories to do with the character. And of course, well, you know, all this stuff at this point, when you're doing crowdfunding, there's always variables and you don't know exactly how things are going to go. And one thing might be more popular than another. And so I'm trying to format in my mind, my next project and how I could release another Wraith story and maybe get a Garbage Man story in there and some other stuff.
There's the artwork, by the way, that you did. It was 2008.
Oh, geez. Oh my gosh, that what 14? That's 14 years ago.
13, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but I've kept that. That was like a brief sketch. I think it was on the back of a Batman Gotham Knight thing they gave out. But
well,
yeah, that's just one thing that's always, you know. But kept with me. The character where is it? It's this character.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, but yeah, I just wanted to show
one
that.
Of yours.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, cool. I didn't draw that. A friend of mine drew it. My collaborator did. But yeah, that's one of my characters. That's her as an adult. I have her as a teenager. You know, I have things like that. I have this all sought out. But now I kind of go and become such a multiverse nut. I personally believe come up with all the different variations. What could happen in live action? What could happen in animated? Because you can never do the same thing. You know, like some things you can't just do. Unless you want to rely on CGI, for example, you could do live action to animation. You know, that's my mindset is try and come up with whatever version you can. And that's what I've been doing for so long. But you mentioned it was Garbage Man. That was something you had originally did DC, and everything. And then you got the rights back. So tell us about Garbage Man. Who is Garbage Man?
Well, when I first went over to DC from Marvel and had, was talking about projects and stuff with Dan DiDio, he had mentioned that, they needed a monster character, and because he wanted Swamp Thing in the DCU, but it was owned by Vertigo at the time.
It was before Brightest Day and everything, well before
right.
that.
Yeah. And so I said, well, let me come up with something and see if you like it. And so I came up with Garbage Man, and he was cool with it. And he said, okay, well, do you want to do this as a, creator-owned thing or just, and I said, yeah, but I said, let's leave it open so it can be used in the DCU if you want to use it for something, right? And so that was kind of how the contract was put together, that I still owned the character, but DC would officially license it from me for as long as they wanted, basically. And so that's what we did. And then, of course, they ended up getting Swamp Thing back shortly after just before I finished, actually, my Garbage Man stuff. So they no longer needed it. So they had no problem of giving me the rights back to it. But it's essentially, it's sort of a classic muck monster type story. We have a lawyer who is working for a pharmaceutical company who happens to be crooked. and he stumbles on some stuff, and he's not necessarily even a, he's not a self-righteous, he's just a guy looking to make a buck, and he's not necessarily looking to stir up trouble, but he's trying to get some illegal payments made, kind of trying to figure out where all that fits so he can defend it. And well, once they found out about this, once they found out that he knew about this, then they had to get rid of him. So he was experimented on by one of their lead pharmaceutical researchers because they were working on a super soldier serum that just they could not get right, and so they were experimenting on various homeless people they might kidnap or something and use for subjects, and so they just figured, oh, we'll use him to test the next one, and of course it went south, and then they had to dispose of the body, so they basically faked an explosion in this section of the laboratory where they're working on him, and he was thought to be dead, but of course this explosion along with the serum, he lands in this refuse area they have behind the plant that they were working on him in, and it merges with all this garbage and stuff. He becomes Garbage Man, and now he's out to get revenge for what they did to him. So it's not the characters are different, but it was very much created to be sort of a classic take on Swamp Thing or Man Thing, or even Sludge, because I don't think it's so much how you get to the monster; it's what you do with the monster once you've got him.
Exactly, and well, yeah, that's exactly it. It's what you do with them that's different, because there's always that kind of uniqueness to a man becoming a monster that, especially when it fits that archetype of sludge or swampish or garbage. It's like those kind of things they're not identical, but they're ubiquitous.
Yes, and I wanted to do. When I worked on Sludge with Steve Gerber wanted to do a crime book, and I wanted to do a monster book. And if you look at the issues I wrote, they're all, he fights the giant alligator man, he fights Frankenstein, he fights these monsters. Whereas the stories that Steve wrote were all sort of about this urban crime stuff that was going on, and Garbage Man was just sort of caught in the middle of it all. And so I wanted to do more of a classic monster book. And so that's kind of how I treated it. And how this sort of plays out is this, what Garbage Man discovers is that he finds that this guy that experimented on him was also experimenting on a lot of other people. And a lot of those creatures are now out roaming around. And so he's kind of has to, find these other monsters that are potentially harmful to society and corral them. And that's at least the initial arc of how that goes. While the while he's trying to uncover the corruption in this pharmaceutical giants that were behind what happened to him.
Exactly. So moving on to some of your other examples of your work, one of which I'll tell you, when they did the reprint of this, I was so glad. And of course, it happened after the guy who pulped it had left. But when DC did this, let's be honest, that's what happened. It was almost as soon as Paul Levitt's gone, printed this, and the funny thing, for those of you who don't know, the reason why this got pulped was, I'll just say the most ridiculous thing. Superman's babysitter, but all because it's pretty much Jack Baby Attack. But the reason why Levitt had such an issue with it was at the very, very end, she accidentally microwaves Baby Clark. And it's like, that's the reason. It's like the whole thing pulped. And your story was the very first one.
Yeah. I was really disappointed because I was like, I got the lead story. This was relatively still early in my career. It was post Sludge, but I still kind of find my way in the mainstream. And I was, I had penciled and inked it, and it was the lead story in there. And I thought, yeah, this will be cool. And then it never came out, right? Because and so until years later when they reprinted it. It was disappointed, as you can imagine, that it didn't. That it never saw the light of day, but
just the idea of all the stretchy characters being part of this cult and everything. Where did that come from? I mean, was that your idea? Was that Dan Curtis?
No, it was Dan Curtis, the writer, who I actually have never met. I just got the script from the editor, and they said, "Hey, you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah!" And but I thought it was really cool because you had all the like you said, the stretchy, like Elongated Man and Plastic Man and Metamorpho and all these. Sort of goofy.
Jimmy too, because Jimmy stretched.
Yeah. So it was very weird. Someone told me that it was kind of a later had said, "Oh, that's a ripoff of a um,
Cthulhu. Clever,
yeah,
because people, yeah.
doggone it. Who's the guy just the Cthulhu? Who created that character? The writer.
Lovecraft. It's very
Yeah. They
Lovecraftian.
said it was kind of a ripoff of a Lovecraft story, and I didn't
I
know.
wouldn't say a rip-off. It felt like it was an homage or a throwback to
Oh,
Lovecraft. That's
okay.
what I would say, because I don't know of anyone who could stretch it a Lovecraft story. Just the idea of, like the cult and everything, but that's a ubiquitous story thing. It
Yeah.
has the
Well, I don't know.
vibe.
I just saying someone had brought that up to me, and I was unaware of it, and I was like, I don't know.
Oh, I do not see it as a rip-off, because if it was a
Okay.
rip-off, how can you explain the stretchiness? That's
Right.
never been the Cthulhu, and Lovecraft is more the Cthulhu, the tentacle stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
anyway, yeah, but it was a fun story to work on, and like I said, it was disappointing that it didn't see the light of day when it was supposed to. But
hey, at least it did eventually.
yep, eventually got it out there.
Yep. Now another one that surprised me that this was one of your favorites you worked on when you mentioned on Nerdette's stream was What If Avengers Disassembled? And
yes,
I love this. I mean, I liked how these earlier what ifs, they actually got in some of the top tier talent to work on it. You know what I mean? And they did that for a while, and then they started going back to doing some other people. But the fact that they made sure they have top tier and I mean, this was the first time I think I saw some of your artwork.
Oh.
And yeah, I mean, just that's what got me knowing you're one of those people who's best for doing, beautiful women and all that stuff. And that's one thing everybody was you were hyped for this story in particular was, the women you were drawing.
Well, that job actually got me the Ms. Marvel series because they saw me. They liked how I handled Ms. Marvel in that story, and she's kind of one of the main players in that story.
Yep.
And
I love that moment where she gets zapped.
Yeah.
just the background is like, yeah. She was punching it.
Well, the fun about that story, of course, is I got to draw so many classic Marvel characters in it. Yeah. And so it was that was a lot of fun, and and it did lead to some other things there at Marvel during that time.
I know, and just the idea that it takes this is one of the first early cases of someone trying to call out what Bendis did.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That's what felt like Jeff Parker being a chance where it's like, of course it's chaos magic, it's chaotic. That was like the first time, and then eventually they would do other books, but this was the earliest case of someone calling out Bendis saying, you don't know the lore. You don't know the continuity. You just did it by the seat of your pants. but yeah, and yeah, that I really love. Now, I unfortunately don't have any of your Wonder Woman work. Unfortunate. I really wish I did, because from what I've seen, and all that, just some of the ideas was her run on Wonder Woman was so good. And I mean, I know some people around the community, at least the certain online communities, have issue with Gail. I'm never going to forget her great work. You know what I mean? I mean, some of her current stuff I might not care for, but the woman knows her stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, we had a the project we worked on, we had a great working relationship, and I have nothing but good things to say about Gail. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Oh yeah, I heard you again. You were talking about this on Nerdette stream, which is I had to get this because I'm like, Wonder Woman Conan. How can you go wrong? And nothing went wrong. And that's the only thing when I hear people give her crap, I point out this. I'm like, yeah, those of you who think she would emasculate someone, she never did that with Conan. Why would you think otherwise?
Well, when I got offered that series, I was like, I wanted to do it.
I didn't mean to rant. I didn't mean to rant there.
No, that's okay. No. It's your show, man. But
I'm sorry. Just that drives me nuts when people dump on her. That's all.
Well, I didn't know what to expect, but I thought, how are they going to pull this off? This is going to be silly. But then, it was like, Gail's writing. I thought, Gail can probably pull this off. And sure enough, she did. It worked really, really well. And it was a terrific story. I had a lot of fun working on it.
Yeah.
And I'm a big, growing up in the 70s, a lot of my influences were, Frazetta and Wright and Barry Smith and guys like that. And so I really like the sword and sorcery genre. And so if I get an opportunity to do something like that, I jumped on it. And I think it turned out to be a real strong miniseries. And I think it actually did better for DC than they would have probably expected. I mean, they traded the thing in a hardcover for crying out loud, so they must have
Oh
been
yeah.
really happy with it. So
Yep, but now Marvel has the rights to it now,
right,
so
so
we know they
there
probably
you
wouldn't be able to
go.
reprint it. They probably
Yeah,
wouldn't be able to. So that's a bummer. But yeah, I mean that's why I got it. I love it so much, and if I ever see you at a convention, I'd make sure I have you sign it alongside her.
there you go.
Yep. Another book that you had worked on was The Death of Hawkman, which
Yes.
yeah, from again, what I remember from that interview was a very like you had a multiple editors and all that, but
Hmm.
and obviously just the idea of Death of Hawkman was going to be, and the fact that he does die though at the end, but it did feel now. In your opinion, did it feel like his death came a little too quickly? Like, just like boom, dead.
Well, I think that since it's I guess you treat that like the climactic moment of the story, right?
Right.
And so,
Yeah. Great
um,
artwork, obviously. I love just that moment of blasting the sparrow.
yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how if there's a proper way to kill a
Someone like
hero,
Hawk.
so
Yeah.
you can kind of walk away and go, wow, that was the right moment. That was the right
Oh
way to do
yeah.
that kind of thing. Um, you could even look back at Spider-Man 122 where the Green Goblin gets
Mm.
killed, and you could think, oh,
Okay, that is very true. That is very true.
that
That
wasn't big enough. It could have been bigger, but it's sort
that's
of
true. But
it
when
was
it's the
so
hero though,
poetic
and
how he
it's
died.
when you're the hero and you have a whole mini building up to that moment. Again,
Yeah,
I'm not being critical. Your artwork was great. I'm not even being critical of Mark and Draco. I've communicated with the guy, great guy. I mean, it's just sometimes you get tasked with that type of assignment and you do what you can, right?
yep.
Yep. And another one you've done that I love, Damage. Once you took over, and
That was a great book. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
yep,
Robert Venditti, the writer, did a great job with that book, and we had a lot of fun with it. It was unfortunate that it didn't catch on longer term.
yeah. Now, in all honesty, from what you know from behind the scenes, how much of Damage was his idea, and how much of it was Tony Daniels that he continued on? I found curious because the whole medals was hyped up as the artists are coming in, they have these great ideas and everything, and most of the time the artists didn't even last long on the title, except for Kenneth Rocafort on Sideways.
Well,
So,
okay, I can only speak to what I know specifically in my experience,
that's
and
all
I
I'm
don't
asking. That's all I'm
know.
asking. That's all I'm asking.
I know that. I mean, I'm sure Dan DiDio had a lot to do with the formation of this entire line,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not Tony Daniel was the driving force or Robert was, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What I do know, however, is that when I went on board, Dan DiDio had told me, he said that he wanted more artist input into these projects and not to be totally controlled by the writer. So we were working
That's why
Marvel,
your name's on the top, right?
I guess, because we worked Marvel style. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
I would
Oh.
sit down and have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with Robert about, what did I want to do, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say, well, can we work in this character? What about this idea? And we those just loose concepts, I wasn't necessarily contributing story ideas as much as just concepts for where we might go with the character and who he might face and those type of things. And
Mm-hmm.
so then he would send me a plot. And a good example is when he fought the Justice League and Superman, those two issues, I think.
Oh, yep.
There was there would be Robert would write the scene out, but then he would say, okay, we need a fight scene between Superman and Damage that lasts 8 pages. It starts
Mm-hmm.
here and ends here, and then I would just fill in everything in between,
Yep.
and then he would go in and dialogue it. So I got a lot of at least the physical action, and I was able to put a lot in plot wise. In the first annual that I did, when
Mm-hmm.
the Damage was fighting those two other
Yep.
monsters, in the bunker, a
Yep.
lot of that was just all the fight scene stuff was just. I mean, I choreographed everything. I came up
Oh,
with
I love that.
everything.
I love the fight sequences here. It felt like a monster bash. I mean, I put
Yeah.
you, Ed McGuinness, some of those guys who do these big, bulky, like type of guys. Like I love that shit.
But I think what happened with these series, at least with Damage, I imagine most of the guys they wanted it to launch with some big name people, but I don't think anybody really artistic wise planned it other than Kevin Roquefort, like you said, stuck around. But I don't think anybody else was really thinking of sticking around past the first couple issues. And to me, that was a mistake.
That hurt it. Yeah, everyone I've heard talk about this agreed that hurt the Metals line because they hyped it up, saying we're giving it back to the artist, and then bye bye.
Well, and I said, why are you guys coming to me at issue 9 and saying, hey, Aaron, do you think you can do something with this? I said, why didn't you come with me to issue? Why didn't you come at me with issue number 1? And then I could have been a part of this from the very beginning, and then you wouldn't have had ended up with 4 different artists before I took over.
Yeah,
in the first 9 issues. Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster. So that was the thing that kind of ticked me off, is because I would have done it, from the beginning, because I love monster books, and Dan DiDio always wanted a kind of a Hulk character, and I think he finally got it with this for the DCU. And I just felt like, maybe it wouldn't have made any difference, but I think if you come to me to begin with, and we'd started the series, Robert and I together, and I would have stayed on the book all the way through, maybe we would have been able to build some a stronger audience just because of the continuity.
Yeah, I agree with that, because Damage, out of all of them, Damage was my favorite, because it just felt like that was the one I really wanted to read the next issue of, because you didn't know what was going to happen next, and especially as it built up to issue 12 or so when you went up to Justice League, it was building momentum up to that. It felt like that was a natural thing. And then afterwards, now, when did you guys get the word that it was going to be canceled? Was it right after around 12 or so, or do you know?
Let me think. We were having a dinner in New York at the during the New York convention. Robert and I and Jamie Rich, the editor, were having story conference, and I don't think at that point we had because that's when we kind of plotted out which was originally, we had talked about using the Spectre and Deadman. And so we got Deadman in there in the Justice League story. So that must have been, I want to say that would have been probably October that we had that meeting, because that's generally when the New York show was, in October. And I don't think we got word really that they was going to get canceled till probably a couple issues later, probably in December. So we knew when we were doing the Monster Island story, which I think was 3 issues with Congarilla, that was going to be, that would be it. But before that, we didn't, and I wanted to get the Spectre in there, and Robert came up with this really great concept to use the Spectre, where the Spectre was going to come down and judge Damage for his wrongdoing, his destruction, his evil, whatever. But the fact that Damage was also this innocent young guy
who didn't ask for this. He didn't ask for this.
Right. So it's kind of like, how does the Spectre judge this guy when he's basically dealing with 2 different personalities? It'd be like judging Bruce Banner based on what the Hulk did, right?
Although nowadays, though, you would question even Banner, because they've revealed, he's not so squeaky clean. But was here, especially doing this soon and early into it, you would have a definitive statement saying you have a monster and you have a good-natured man.
Right. And but they didn't want us to use the Spectre for whatever reason. I can't remember why that came down, but
wow.
So that whole storyline got scrapped, and then we
that would
ended
have been a perfect note to end on. That would have been a perfect note to end on.
I know. And but so we ended up, of course, then doing the Monster Island thing with Congarilla, which was a lot of fun, but I don't think it had the sort of the depth and emotional impact that the Spectre story might have had.
Oh yeah, because again, if you were to end it with that story, that would have been perfect. But instead, just ending it, him on a boat going out to sea into the sunset, poetic, but Oh, and I gotta say, this one, next moving on, this I love the story for the Marvin the Martian and Martian Manhunter. I love this. This was one of my favorites. Just and your artwork, the fact that some people tried to make the characters look more realistic, the DC style, people, what they called it. You just kept it more Looney Tuny than,
Well, but, I was finishing up Death of Hawkman, and I was sitting in Dan DiDio's office, and we were talking about I think we were in his office, maybe it was on the phone, I don't recall, but anyway, so I'd asked him, I said, "Hey, Dan, what do we got next? What can I do next?" And he's like, "Well," he goes, "I don't have anything series wise available just yet." He goes, "But we are doing these." And he mentioned the Looney Tunes things. And I said, "Okay, now I'm interested," because I'm a big Looney Tunes fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, who do you got left that you haven't assigned yet?" And he said, "Well, he gave me a couple options, and he said, Marvin Martian." And I went, "Stop, I'm doing that." And yeah,
I
so I
love
had no
Marvin.
idea.
He's one of my favorite too.
Right, I had no idea what Steve Orlando, the writer, was going to do or anything like that, but I didn't care. I was like, "Hey, it's
Mm-hmm.
Marvin Martian, let's do it." And so that really kicked off one of my most enjoyable years of my career,
Mm-hmm.
because I did that first, followed that, up with Wonder Woman Conan,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that, I did 3 issues of Herculoids for Future Quest
Oh
Presents.
yeah.
I'm a big Herculoids fan, so I got to do, that's 10 issues over the
Yeah.
course of that year that ended up being just one favorite kind of
Mm-hmm.
character after another.
That
And
must yeah, that must have been fantastic. Do you
yeah, it was a
think
lot of fun.
yeah, yep. Oh, they're that popping in.
Hey, Nerdette, thank you,
Yep.
Tristan, for
Yep.
stopping by and saying, "Hey, I enjoyed being on your show so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to
Mm-hmm.
have me on." So,
Yep. But what I love about this is just so much like the character. That's one thing I love about with Marvin, that there could be a good character to him. The Duck Dodgers series revealed that, and the fact that now this goes to the writer, but also to your artwork portraying as well, just the sadness behind him, how he feels like Jean doesn't get it.
yeah,
All that. It's like it's not like he's a bigot because he's a bigot. It's a bigot through experience, through what he's been
yeah,
through.
yeah.
It's like humanity was, let's just be honest, evil in his world. But I was gonna say the Ludium Q-36 explosive space modulator. In the
There it
end,
is.
it's
There
still
it
a
is.
stick of TNT, but you made
Yeah,
it look fancy.
I dressed it up a little bit, but other than that, it's still
It's
that
still,
little stick of dynamite.
I love that, and just again, just so much of this was just so good. And now, obviously, you didn't draw it, but what did you think about the backup story?
Oh, I
Yeah,
love that. I think it was
yeah.
hilarious because I loved how they went in and did like that sort of classic Warner Brothers art approach to doing this story.
Mm-hmm.
That was terrific.
Yep,
Uh,
especially the ending where, I now love I Heart Earth now because he took on the form of a gift.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean seriously, that was just so good. And how much liberties were you given? Obviously, you got the script from Steve Orlando, but like for example, was this all described, or did you just come up with it on your own? The
Well, I knew what it was. I was described in the sense that I knew what it was supposed to do,
mm-hmm.
and so then I just kind of sort of thought, well, how can I Looney Tunize this, but still make it, like it might have been an actual military type weapon or something, So it was, and I'm not a big machine guy, so it was a little bit more of a challenge for me to do that type of thing. But it was a fun challenge, and I don't remember exactly how well Steve described it, but I think it was more of a just sort of like this big drill thing, and then you
Right,
sort of kind of go with uh, what you can come up
right.
with.
Yeah, but again, it was this. Like I said, there's a reason why this is one of my favorites of all of them because, again, your artwork, but just the story. Because that's one thing. And now I know you had mentioned on Tristan's show that a lot of some that Warner Brothers did not take kindly to it, but it's like now someone I gotta understand, like the Jonah Hex one, loved it, but I can see why they would take issues with that. This though, I feel like this really captured the character and humanized him.
Well, I think to them it was just more of they it was more keeping the characters on model because
Ah,
of
that's
what
true.
they looked at as those are franchise type things at Warner Brothers, and the Looney
Mm-hmm.
Tunes has to stay Looney Tunes, and the fact that we all sort of jacked around with them a little bit, some to
Mm-hmm.
greater
Some more than
degrees than
others.
others. That for a comic book audience that really appreciated it, but they felt like it was. And I'm speculating here because I don't
You're
know
right.
the
Obviously,
inside,
obviously.
but that they probably felt that it was not, that they were. Those were the type of things that because they had animated shows attached to them and everything else, we couldn't just go off half cocked like we did with some of
Mm-hmm.
those characters and without them getting ticked off about it.
Oh yeah,
You know,
especially around the second batch where you had Gale's Sylvester and Tweety, and Sylvester does not even look anywhere close to Sylvester. I mean,
right.
and Tweety looks like a realistic bird. I mean, again, I get it. It's supposed to be this is the DC them in the DC universe. Then the backup is them in the actual in the Looney Tunes universe.
Right.
The only one that actually was closest was, and I bet you how much I bet Warner Brothers was putting their foot down this was the Bugs Bunny Legion one, where Bugs was Bugs throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Why do I have a feeling because it was Bugs, they put their foot down on that one?
Well, I would guess that there's probably they didn't appreciate some of the storylines either that the characters were involved in. You know, that even if you kept the story true or the character true to himself, they're still putting him in stories that are more, I don't know, adult or something like that they felt probably moved him outside of the parameters they were comfortable with.
Yeah, like Batman Elmer Fudd.
Yeah, my gosh, that was a great one. And
that was a great one, but let's be honest, though, it was one of the biggest sellers, but I bet you Warner Brothers were gnashing their teeth like.
Yep.
But another one you had worked on was Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Infinite Crisis.
Yes.
And yeah, I love this one. This was such a clever one, and just you worked with James Tynion on this one, and did you have? Now I asked it with some people. What was the collaborative process? Was this just script, art, or was this bouncing ideas?
No, it was script and art pretty much. James and I had a few emails back and forth when I had questions or said, "Hey, I want to do this. What do you think?" kind of stuff. But I took this project, not that I didn't take most all of my work seriously, but I really thought this was going to be a prestige format book, which I was aware of going in. I got the opportunity to kind of pick which of the dark multiverse stories I wanted to do, and I just thought this might be the most fun to work on, simply because of the Justice League being in it and having more characters to deal with. And so I took a lot of time figuring out the visual storytelling and how I was going to portray different characters, and I've actually did a process video on my YouTube channel on how I did the layouts and some of the things I did storytelling wise. So I was
always curious about this with Alexander Luthor, his arm thing turned into a gun. How was that described in the script and when you drawing it like that?
Well, it was just
curious.
Yeah, well, it wasn't described. It wasn't, when they do stuff like that, generally a writer's not going to get too specific, but they'll say, he has this gun comes out of his armor. And I'm trying to remember exactly how that was. I think that it was described in a way that made it seem like he had a gun on him, or it was hidden someplace in his armor. And
with that suit?
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. I was like, where the heck am I supposed to get this gun? And I thought, well, what if it transforms out of, and that's the way it made sense to me. So that's how I did it. I don't think it was exactly described like that in the script.
Oh yeah, because the rest of it's just a gun, so.
Right.
But no, that makes perfect sense. That's one thing I was always confused. Thank you for clearing that up, because that was just one thing I'm like, what's going on here? But now that you put it in that context of he just whips it out, you're like, yeah, where would he whip it out from? That thing's skin tight.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't have 100% clarity on that, but it seems to me that that's how that went down. Because I remember I was kind of in a conundrum there, trying to figure out how I was going to get him to produce this weapon and how it would look. And so I just had it sort of, grow out of his armor. I don't think that's how James described it, but I don't want to say for sure because I honestly don't remember.
Also, I love this. You perfectly emulated Phil Jimenez's, that opening pages. I love that. That was perfect.
Well, I figured you had to do that, right? You're recreating a scene like that, and I wanted to make sure everybody understood that it was the exact same scene, but just in a different context. So I basically took the double page spread layout that he did and just did it exactly the same, but just drew it how I would draw it as opposed to how he drew it.
Yep. And yeah, then of course that moment, I felt so bad for Ted after everything that happened.
Yeah. That was a great moment, because if you remember, if you read back the old what ifs from the original series from the 70s,
Oh
They
yeah.
also they always had sort of this kind of impactful emotional moment at the end that usually was depressing because it went the wrong way, right?
Basically telling
And
you enjoy what you had the right, even if you might not like what you had, if you know it could have been worse, or be
yeah,
careful what you wish for.
right, exactly. And I felt this story had such an emotional impact at the end
Hmm.
that it was great. It reminded me of those old what ifs.
Yep.
And but I thought James did a terrific job of really kind of leading us down this path where, you want to root for Ted Cord, but he's doing the wrong thing, but maybe he's doing it for the right reasons. And then when it all
Exactly.
comes to fruition, he ends up killing his best friend as a result. I mean,
Hmm.
it was tragic, and
Yep.
you could
Yep. And
it
what makes it more
really had emotional impact.
and what makes it more tragic is the fact that it's the dark multiverse. The bad option's always going to happen. He
Right.
doesn't know. He doesn't know that's where he's at though. So as far as he's concerned, I mean, if this was a what if they happened outside the dark multiverse, oh yeah, probably would have gone his way. But the fact that he's in the dark multiverse, it's always going to be the worst pass.
Right.
Always.
All right. Exactly.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that was a real pleasure to work on. That was one of the last, I'm trying to think, big things I did before
Well.
AT&T cleaned house, other
Yep.
than Justice League. Well, that was the very last thing I did
Yep. Yep.
for DC, but
Yep.
I did have that run on Justice League
Oh
after
yeah. Oh
Dark
yeah.
Multiverse.
Yeah, that was that was good too. But yeah, when working on this, I mean, obviously you were just one of many artists, and
Right.
I know that basically this was them condensing what was originally supposed to be a big story thing. But were you ever involved in any of those 5G things at all?
No, because they were just sort of in the beginning of things, and I'd heard talk about what they're doing, and I talked to some other guys in promotions and things like that over in DC about this stuff coming up, and then of course that sort of when Dan got let go, I mean that whole thing went to pot. But
Right.
yeah, that was supposed to be a really 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 big deal. It was the next new 52, if you will, from DC, and so it seemed very odd that some of the choices that AT&T would go in there and start cleaning house right in the middle of a. Of course, they probably didn't care, but from a DC standpoint, it didn't make any sense, to let
Oh
Mark
yeah.
Morello go and then let Dan go right in the middle when you're getting ready to launch this
Oh
huge,
yeah, that is true. Now, of
very
course, and I've
bad
also heard
timing.
from I've also heard from other sources that DC editorial would have been much stricter than they would have been with New 52. So I could see why some of the writers were not going to put up with that. I could see that if that's the case, where they
Right.
would have said, "You guys don't come up with ideas, we give you the plots." I don't think any writer would have accepted that if that's true from what I've heard. I don't
Yeah,
know
now
if
I
you.
didn't, like I said, I didn't have a lot of creative insight on that stuff. I can't even remember what I was working on when that was being developed, but I tend to be kind of uh,
Hmm.
laser focused on what I'm working on and stuff that's going on that was going on in the company around me at the time. I had no idea, you
Right.
know.
Oh, I
Uh,
understand. Oh, I completely understand. But yeah, you did the this was what you did, right? That's the
yeah,
Superman stuff, the steel
yeah,
stuff.
the steel thing, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Just and the fact that you had Dan Jurgens writing it. So of
Yeah.
course had him. You probably let me guess. Did you feel like Dan's co-writing this? I don't want to mess it up.
Well, I got, I got.
I'm being cute when I ask that. I'm being cute when I ask
No,
that.
no, no. I understand, but to a certain degree, it's like I can see how you might kind of come into that and think. But I had worked with Dan before, and
Ah,
so
okay.
we already
Oh
had
yeah. Oh
sort of
yeah. Oh yeah. Just the generations.
well, yeah, Justice League International
International.
in the
That's
New
what I meant.
52. That was me and Dan, and so I had really sort of, we had established a pretty good working relationship and an understanding of what I was going to bring to the table and what he was bringing to the table, and so I didn't. I didn't really feel any sort of like added pressure because I happened to be working on, something as
Right.
iconic as what he had done with Death
Hmm.
of Superman, because I'd already gotten that out of the way when we worked together before on Justice
Right.
League. So
Which that was great. If I had a chance, I was such scrambling. I work went a little bit longer, so I was scrambling to grab stuff. I should have grabbed those as well because I have them all over the place.
yeah,
That and Generations Lost, the Generation Lost stuff. I mean, especially you did the selected issues, but especially that final issue, I loved it especially when you had Jaime take over the OMAC and everything, and how it just goes from normal to all of a sudden this weird distorted monster. I
yeah.
love that. That was great.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing because I went on to that right after Wonder Woman because I was
Hmm.
initially supposed to take over Superman, but I had asked the
Oh yeah,
editor,
the walkabout. It was the
yeah, I
walkabout
said I'm
era.
not doing that, and so this is what they had going, and they said, well, they're doing it like it was like twice a month or something. I think this came out
Yep,
over a
yep.
year. There's 24 issues over a year, and so obviously I couldn't do every issue, but I was
Hmm.
able to go in and pick and choose the issues I wanted to do. And so, like, I wanted to draw the Metal Men, so I said, okay, well, I'll do that
Oh,
issue.
love that issue.
And the one where Captain Atom goes into the future, I thought that was
Hmm.
really fun, and I wanted to do that one. And um, so it was really fun to work on, despite the fact that I didn't get to draw every single issue.
Oh, yeah, that would
Um,
have been. I mean, the fact that he even had Mark Bagley when they were doing Trinity, even that one, a guy as fast as he, even at his older age, couldn't keep up, was doing every issue. They're going to do like half an issue.
right.
I don't think anyone could have done all the issues.
Yeah, it was too much, but they were sort of taken by surprise that the response to that
Oh,
just the International Generations did so
they
well.
were probably expecting Brightest Day to do bit the best. I bet.
Yeah, and so that's why they decided to launch the Justice League International for the New 52 title
Hmm.
because that had done so well. They're like, well, let's give them their own title.
Yep, and then that did well. The JLI did very well,
Mm-hmm.
and from what I also recall from that interview you had with Tristan, there was someone on top. I'm not going to ask who. I'm not going to ask who. Had took issue with it or took umbrage with it, and basically was like, "Kill it."
Yeah, and so yeah, it got killed. And like I said, the dumb thing about that is you never cancel a book that's actually selling.
Yeah,
And but that's what they did. And
and I'm not going to ask. Obviously, again, I'm not going to ask who, but I just got to say when I read the Justice League International Annual that basically was supposed to close that out and do all
right,
that stuff, that felt like it went. Given who was writing it, so mean spirited. It felt
I
so mean. It felt like they were taking digs at it at you guys.
I didn't read it obviously because I didn't work on it. I
Right,
know that
but
was
yeah,
Jason.
Batman was Stacey saying shut it down. It's like Batman was promoted, and I know, especially when Dan writes it, Batman's always hoping for the best from these guys.
Right.
But in that case, it felt like no, he was hating them. He's like, shut it down. It's a mistake. It's like that's not how you ended things, guys. Or guy just flat out quit. It just felt like let's take what they left off and just dump on it. It's like
Yeah. Well,
that's cruel. That's cruel.
yeah, it doesn't. Well, and it's not. I don't think it's fair to the fans that are supporting the book either. I think
Mm-hmm.
Dan Jurgens had a great idea about, and I discussed this I think too earlier with either on Nerdette or someone else's channel
Yeah.
that Dan suggested, well, look, if you don't want this to be a Justice League book, let's make them go rogue and they
Mm-hmm.
can be kind of like
Oh
these
yeah.
outside the Justice League, and that could
Maybe not the
create all
outsiders, of
sorts of interesting
course.
dynamics, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't want to do it, so
Yeah. That just felt like someone didn't like fun. It's what it sounds like. It sounds like
yes,
someone didn't. Now I know people would want to point to Dan, but I don't always because I've read Dan's writing. Dan does some really fun stuff. So when people always want to dump on him for that, it's like maybe his ideas could be dark, but he himself is fun. So I don't
oh
know.
yeah, that felt like an old Silver Age book. That's why I enjoyed it so much. It was
Hmm.
just like a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. But and then you went on to Amethyst. Now, I
Mm.
just want to point out, I'm trying to get Christy Marks to come on my show. I hope some of my interviews with someone like Ethan and all that stuff, haven't derailed it. I hope not, but you never know.
It's
You
hard to
never.
say, man.
Yeah, but yeah, it was Amethyst. I mean, this is the woman who did Gem and the holograms and all that. It's like how and yeah, you said it was great working with her. I mean, that was also a very good book that you unfortunately knew was not going to last long. Or it was just one of those
Well,
you're like, yeah.
that was kind of the problem. I mean, I didn't want to do it because I didn't think it would do well,
Mm-hmm.
and but it was one of those situations where I didn't have. Well, the way New 52 was set up was, they dump
Oh
three
yeah.
books, they bring in three books, they dump three books. So you didn't have, it wasn't like, it was also structured that it wasn't like, oh, yeah, Aaron, you can run off and do that. Well, no, because it has to fit within this structure that they're
They
doing.
wanted to
So,
keep it to 52 books.
right. And so I had to do whatever was coming up. And that's, in terms of subject matter, it was fine, but I knew it wouldn't sell. But I was really pleasantly surprised about and because I had never worked with Christy before, but I
Mm-hmm.
was really pleasantly surprised about how well she did it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it
Oh
was,
yeah.
and I got to redesign the characters, and it was really challenging because every new world was there was nothing. I mean, I had to come up with everything,
Mm-hmm.
and so I really sort of kind of took it on as a creative challenge and said, you know what, I'm gonna really pour myself into this,
Oh, and it
and
shows. It
and
shows.
thank you. And so I'm really pleased with how the book reads and how it looks, but it was just one of those things that just didn't
Yeah.
catch on.
Yeah, especially when they had to try and do that whole Diamond of Eclipso thing to try and tie in with some of the other books, and it felt like well, the other book lasted a little bit longer. That was the Demon Knights. That one lasted a little longer, but unfortunately, Amethyst didn't last that much longer, and that's just a crying shame. And yeah, Christie hasn't done that much comics since she moved on to taking over Birds of Prey, and that I feel she was dealt a bad hand because a lot of people were already not liking the book when it started, and then when she took over, she didn't have that much else to work with, and at least that's from my opinion. If I ever get her on, I'll ask her, but
Right.
it just felt like, and she hasn't done much since, which is like that's a crying shame. I mean, I get it, she's getting, she's on the older side, but come on.
Well, I think I don't know Christie's situation because
Right.
we were in contact quite a bit while we were
Hmm.
working together. But you get on another
Right.
project and
Exactly.
you never talk to anybody again. But she was working in gaming and she was working in animation and she was
That's
working
true. She
comics. So
has
I don't
fingers
know
in
if
everything.
I don't know if she just if comics were if she wanted to stay in comics and there was no options, or if she just moved back to
Who
whatever
knows?
she happened to be doing before. So
Right. But yeah, but who knows, of course. But it is what it is.
yeah,
Again, I hope I can get her on because there's so much of her stuff I love as well.
yeah.
But yeah, though. So again, there's so many other stuff I could have brought out. Like I said, I just grabbed the stuff I really wanted to talk about. But with just in general, like all of your time. I mean, actually, I didn't ask this. How long have you been in the industry?
Well, I started doing like work for Blackthorn Comics like in
Ah.
88 or 89.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I got my first Marvel work probably 90. Well, let me think here. It was 89, 90. Probably in late 1990 or early 91, I
Mm-hmm.
started getting some stuff from Marvel, um, working on what the Huma title, and
Mm-hmm.
I did a fill in on
Oh, the
Submariner.
what? The what does? I remember the what does. And you
Yeah,
did. What was that character's name? One with the pot in
Forbish,
his head.
Forbish
Yep.
Man. Yeah,
Forbish
I
Man. Yep.
I wrote penciled and inked all of those so that I could
Mm-hmm.
maximize my profits.
Smart. Smart.
Those books. So, but yeah, so those were the first thing I did, and then I got some. I did a She-Hulk fill in. I did a Submariner fill in. I did a Marvel Comics Presents, and
Mm-hmm.
I did some Spider-Man backups and some Spider-Man annual backups and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I did a Dark Hawk annual.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then that's when Ultraverse,
Oh,
came
yep. And
and
then Sludge.
recruited
Yep.
me. And I think that was probably when I went and took over Sludge.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was working for the first time, when I was working full time in the
Mm-hmm.
industry. When that was
All right.
93. So, well, it came out in 93. So when did I take over? Probably in 92 is when I started working on it. And well, actually, that's not true because it was early 93 and I started working on it, and it came out in October of 93. So that was the first steady work that I had in comics where I became kind of a full-time comics artist. Before that, I'd been working in a commercial art studio
Mm-hmm.
and doing commercial art and doing comic book stuff when I could get it. And so, yeah, so I guess you could say full-time. I mean, I started drawing comics in 89, probably 88, 89, but then full-time since 93.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a while.
Yep. Yeah, the Malibu line. Oh, that was such a great thing. It was like, it was in the stepping stones of Valiant, obviously, just having these creative stuff. And then Marvel bites them out for their coloring process, nothing more. And then they hasn't done much since with them. I mean, Now, there's been theories back and forth to why they haven't done anything else with them. Where do you stand on what you think why they're not doing it? Is it the 5%, or do you think it's other reasons?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Roland Mann, well, I was just on Wes's Thinking Critical show not too long ago, and we were talking about the Malibu stuff. And my assessment was that maybe, maybe they didn't want to pay the extra royalties, but Roland felt that there were certain people that he wouldn't mention any names. And since he's not going to mention any names, I'm not going to mention any names.
All right.
Because I didn't know this, but I know who he was talking about. But anyway, there's certain people that are attached to those properties that they would have to work with if they brought them back in any capacity. And, apparently they just don't want to work with them.
Oh, so, I think I'm not going to say the name either. Looking what I just looked up on Wiki, I think I have a good idea who, especially with a certain Marvel tie he had. So
yes, so it depends, I guess, on who you talk to. And Marvel didn't buy. The rumor was that they bought Malibu for the coloring department, but they bought Malibu to keep DC from buying Malibu because DC was really interested in buying Malibu, and so Marvel just came in over the top and gave them more money to basically keep DC from getting them. Because I think DC actually wanted to use them. Marvel never did. They just wanted to keep DC from getting them.
That is a shame because the Malibu guys felt like they could have fit, in DC. Well, they could have fit in Marvel too, but I really do feel like they could have fit in DC because get something new and fresh and everything. Right. And that is a crying shame because, that just, especially this is the point where Marvel was just throwing money everywhere, if I recall, which got them into the bankruptcy in the first place. They were just throwing money at let's buy these baseball cards, let's buy our own distribution, let's do this. And I think that's why people were so willing. It felt more ridiculous to think they bought Malibu for the coloring process, but now that you say that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. Now I didn't know this until recently, but that's what I've been told. So
and if that's the case,
who know.
Wow. But then obviously you moved on from there and you did. As I said, when I look over your stuff, you've been bouncing around. I mean that in a good way. Just a descriptive way. Of the different companies and everything. Between working at Marvel and working at DC, which would you say you had the most fun at, if you had to decide? I mean, yeah.
Well, DC. I mean, I had a really good relationship with Dan DiDio, and he's the one who sort of, lured me over to DC from Marvel, and I had. I had good working relationships with people at Marvel, with the exception of, one or two editors that ticked me off. But you're always gonna run into that to a certain degree. But because,
of course,
I think when I was working at Marvel, Joe Quesada was in charge, and I don't know Joe at all, and I don't even know that I've ever actually maybe I've met him once or twice at a function or something, but just briefly. And so I never really had much of a relationship with him, and like I had with Dan DiDio, who of course was the top guy at DC.
Oh yeah, the top dog,
and I had a great working relation with him, and we were constantly in contact and talking about things and projects and so forth. So DC was a much easier environment for me than Marvel, where I wasn't really sure from job to job, where I was at. Where at DC, it was a much different feeling with Dan. So I'd have to say that, although I enjoy the Marvel characters more because I just grew up a Marvel zombie, that the environment for me personally at DC was better simply because that I had the publisher looking out for my back all the time, and so that was always kind of a comforting feeling, knowing that the top dog liked your stuff and was looking out for you. So
Now, obviously at Marvel, DC. They've still kept a very good high, preference for artists. Get some high tier artists. You don't see them try and scrape the bottom of the barrel and all that. Whereas with Marvel, cutting things, and all that stuff, and then of course we see how they draw the women and everything. Whereas again, DC seemed to have still want to keep that. Did you have that vibe at DC where they still felt like draw strong women, all that stuff, compared to what was going on at Marvel?
Well, I never, things have obviously gotten very different politically and culturally wise within the industry in a very short period of time.
Oh, way too fast.
Yeah,
Way
so
too fast.
I wasn't really when I was at Marvel, and drawing Ms. Marvel, no one was telling me, you know, don't make
Yeah.
don't make her sexy, don't make her good looking, whatever. No one was saying that, so it wasn't really even a
Mhm.
thing. And then at DC, I never ran into any of that, because
Mhm.
I think it really started to manifest itself right after AT&T cleared house, and cleaned house and got rid of so many
Oh,
established editors at DC. Then you had all younger people moving up into positions of power and authority.
Much like at Marvel, it happened when they started bringing the new bloods in.
Yeah, and then everything sort of changed really rapidly. So I was never affected by it because I
Mhm.
was out the door before it sort of took effect.
Right. So given that, I'm already starting to get. I'm already. Whoa.
Nope, sorry, my dog. My dog always has to bark when I'm live streaming.
That's
Always at
all right.
least
That's
once.
fine. That is perfectly fine. I was just gonna say was that with because I'm just saying because when I'm looking at with DC currently, I'm already starting to get worried given some writers are being able to get away with some things, but I just hope the artwork stays strong because that is one thing I would say that DC has still kept its strong artwork, whereas Marvel pick and choose. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like.
Well, I know that just by talking to other guys that, like I said, I haven't worked at Marvel for
Oh
just,
yeah, yeah. No, I know.
you know
Again, I'm just
10
saying from
years, right?
observation.
And
I'm just
so,
saying this from
but
observation. I'm not trying to
right.
ask if you knew anything. I'm just saying from you being a professional in general, what's your take on it is all I'm asking.
Well, I know that everybody's trying. Hang on a second. I got to shut this door.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Go right.
Sorry about that.
no,
So
no
anyway, I
problem.
don't know.
No
It's
problem.
probably not going to help too much, but
I have dogs in my parents' house. I understand that.
yeah, exactly. So, I know that that what I hear from the industry is, from guys that are working there or have worked there, that they have, a while ago, Marvel established these A, B, C rates, depending on how well a book sold might depend on what
Hmm.
your page rate was if someone who worked on it. None of that ever sort of was happening at DC, and it may be happening now. I have no idea
Oh, I
because, like
hope
I said, I
not. I
haven't
hope
been
not.
at DC for a year. But so, um, I know that there's a big push by the parent companies to save money, cut costs, and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. And so I think you're seeing the fruits of that,
Yeah.
unfortunately, where you're going to see a few people are going to get paid well, but a lot of people are not,
Oh yeah.
and so then it becomes, how do I can people still make a living drawing comics? Are we going back, to the 60s and maybe early 70s where page rates were just terrible, and
Yeah.
guys had to do 2 or 3 books a month just to make a living, and
And thus their artwork would probably suffer during that
right.
point.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Not everyone could be Kirby where they could just chug them out. And even that, I'm pretty sure that's more like you don't know what it was behind the scenes for him, for all we know.
Right. Well, the other thing is that it's like back then, yeah, these guys, they had to do 2 or 3 books a month, but they were only charging, 25 cents a piece, or 20 cents or 15 cents or whatever for these. Now you're paying $5 or $6 for a book. And if you're going to pay
Hmm.
$5 or $6 for a comic, it better look good.
Oh
So there's
yeah,
kind of,
definitely.
I think there's probably some of this idea of how to save money, is counterintuitive to this, what's going to adversely or positively affect the sales of a book,
Oh
because I
yeah,
don't
like
think you can charge somebody a lot of money for something and then give them a subpar product and expect them to keep
yeah.
supporting it.
Just because like, oh, pretty cover,
Yeah,
mediocre interior. It's
right.
like,
So
and look, I mean, I've seen so much of those Marvel stuff. Like again, that infamous whoever drew that weird monstrous looking She-Hulk. I mean, again, when Ed McGuinness does it, it looks good. I'm not
mhm.
a fan of it, but he's good at drawing that stuff. When you have
Yeah.
other people doing it, it's like, yikes! Like who are they hiring? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just,
like I said, it's a different landscape out there right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all sort of shakes out over the next several months or couple of years, because
oh
I
yeah.
think if the industry is going to survive, at least, and I'm not sure that it is, in the sense that we have known it traditionally to survive in, just because of all these different things that are going on. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how everything evolves or devolves, and
Definitely.
how the industry shakes out, and what are options going to be for traditional comic book readers out there. Is it all going to be, is most of the good stuff suddenly going to come from the independent market now instead of
Oh
Marvel
yeah.
and DC, even though Marvel and DC have all the properties that everybody really is attached to and wants to be good. But if the product, eventually, if the product isn't good, people
Yeah.
get tired of it, and they're going to go to where the
Exactly.
product is good.
Exactly. And well, because and that goes back to his crowdfunding. Because one thing I've noticed is, with some exceptions, like Cyberfrog, that's a one in a, well, no pun intended, 1 in a million, and all that. Odds of getting, or even Rainbow Brute and everything,
Mhm.
reaching up to nearly 450K,
Yeah.
one in a million, But even that, though, I feel with, especially some there's some who I feel are doing it because they have a good heart behind it, and then there's others. No, I'm not going for specifics. I don't want to bring up specifics, all right? But there's some who are in it because they want to get paid, all that. Yep, I can definitely tell you're in it because it's your heart that you really want to tell in the story. So I'm not counting you in that side. I want to make that clear. I'm just talking about, but there are some you've seen out there who are doing it like they just want the clout, they just want this and that, but. Like, okay, I'll be honest. Given how he acted when after the end of his campaign, Scott Snyder was Noctera. Great book at Image, but the campaign kind of tells another story, how he reacted after that. And I think some people, when they go into it, it's like for someone like me, for example, I want just to get my story out to the world. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what matters most, is people who have this idea. And that's why I tell you, when you could tell, and this is my own opinion, you're free to give yours. What you could tell is if someone actually has an idea, a long form idea, not just I got this one, maybe 2 books, and that's it. No, if they actually have like an ongoing universe, that tells you their heart's in it. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think some people. Again, I apologize for the dog barking
Oh no, that's
downstairs.
fine. That's fine.
I
That's
think
fine.
my daughter has a friend over, and every time someone new walks in the house, it's the dog explodes for 15 minutes. But um, the thing, I think you can, if you have, obviously, if you're trying to cultivate an audience for a long term,
Mm-hmm.
relationship, or universe, or whatever, then obviously you have different goals than if you're just saying, hey, crowdfunding is really hot right now. If I can release one book and make $500,000, yeah, for me. And I mean, yeah, sure, we'd all love for that to be the case, but I think if you want to keep doing comics and you're not happy with maybe what Marvel and DC are doing, or you don't have the opportunity to work for Marvel or DC, then you've got to find ways to cultivate your project and an audience for that project. And so I mean, you could, like, for example, if I came in and said, I'm just doing Wraith of God because it's a story I've had for a while and I really want to do it, and I don't really plan on doing anything after it.
Oh no! Oh
I
yeah,
think
I get.
you can still be a creator with integrity doing
Oh
that.
yeah.
But I
I
would
was
think
more talking about the ones who you can look at it. Like, they might give you a good premise, but they don't have much beyond that first book, or they peter out because something else came up or whatever. I'm talking more like that.
well, the reality of the situation is when you're crowdfunding a book, you're the publisher, you're
Yep.
you've got
Oh
to
yeah.
do everything. You got to do promotion,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
it's time consuming. And I maybe a lot of people just I don't think a lot of people come into it and get an idea that this is,
Oh yeah.
they don't have an idea clearly of what is involved until you get into it, and then it's just like, it's really burdensome. And so you might do a project and say, man, I never want to go through that again. I'm going to go back to where someone's going to pay me to do something, and I don't have to worry about all that other stuff. But then
That's true.
you give up your freedom, to do your own stuff in a lot of cases, because Scott Snyder, he has the cloud. He can do whatever he wants, wherever he wants. And,
I was just talking about how he reacted afterwards. You could
yeah, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention, but
yeah.
but
Well,
a
he
lot
came
of
out
us,
alongside Berserk, so take that. What you say?
mm,
How do you think he probably reacted when you
yeah,
compare it to Berserk's numbers? How would anyone react, right? It's
yeah,
like,
that's true. That's true. But I don't think that a lot of us don't have the clout,
right?
to go in and say, yeah, I'm taking over Spider-Man. I want to do this, and they go, okay, do whatever you want, Aaron. That's not going to happen.
Oh no, no.
So the only thing I'm left with then is, of course, coming up with another project to crowdfund after this,
Hmm.
and try to develop my own independent label and
Oh yeah.
properties that then find an audience for that. And
Hmm.
I know this other stuff goes with it, all the the hard work and the promotion and the
Oh
all
yeah.
the other stuff that maybe a lot of us as just creators would rather just avoid and let someone else do that. But that's
Hmm.
just the reality of it. So you have to be willing to
Hmm.
accept that as
Hmm.
well.
Oh,
And I am.
yep.
Some people
Oh yeah,
aren't.
and that's why I give props for people like you who definitely know what you were getting or at least had a good idea of what you're getting yourself into. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Garbage Man, that first campaign not so well, but at least they gave you a good idea of what to
Right.
expect when you were doing this one. It's like,
Right. Well,
okay,
when I first launched Garbage Man, I was still working at DC full time.
hmm,
So it wasn't, if it failed, it wasn't catastrophic to me,
yep,
because I still had work. But now in a
hmm,
situation where I'm not attached to DC or Marvel or anybody,
hmm,
this becomes a priority. It has to
yeah,
succeed, because what am I going to do if it doesn't? Right. So
exactly, exactly.
you gotta really, you can't just kind of sit back and go, oh, I don't feel like live streaming today, or oh, I don't want to do another
Yeah.
interview. You got to do it. That's just
Oh
part
yeah.
of it.
Yep. Now, if I can give my own little advice, this is just my own little advice from my own
Sure.
observations.
Sure.
The way you've been doing it, you've been doing very well. You still talk about the work, you still focus on with comics and everything. I always feel like those like the people who do that are the ones that are going to keep people going for the long run. Those that focus more on the drama, and I'm not just talking about Easton. I'm talking about some other ones in general who focus more on that and rarely bring up their work, or if they do, it's like a blip on their stream and all that. Those ones you might captivate to that audience, that particular audience, but you're not going to get much broader appeal, in my opinion.
Well, you have to, I think when you go into this, you have to sort of look at it. Like, obviously, I have my own YouTube channel, right? And I've
Oh,
had
yep.
one for, almost 2 years, I guess now.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the reality is my YouTube, am I doing the YouTube channel to be a YouTube personality and make money doing that? Or am I using my YouTube channel as a platform to promote my
Exactly.
comic projects and
Exactly.
my comic? And that's what I'm doing, right?
Yep.
Other people are looking at their YouTube channel as a source of income, as a, and obviously you want your channel to be entertaining. You want people to
Mm-hmm.
watch it and be entertained. But I did it to promote comics and
Mm-hmm.
promote my work, just like I'm on social media, not because I want to show you a picture of my dinner that I had tonight, but because I
Sorry,
want
sorry.
you to know what I'm working on and to
Mm-hmm.
expose people to my art
Exactly.
that maybe wouldn't have seen it before. So, if I make a few bucks on my YouTube channel through
Oh yeah,
advertising or
exactly.
super chats or whatever, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not why I'm on YouTube. I'm on YouTube to promote my work.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. And one other point I would say is, I mean, I say it about with Ethan because I know that's a bit of a personality, the showman that she put on. Because I've interacted with the more real Ethan. When I had him on my show, and everything, I have, the interview somewhere. I've hidden that among other few other things just for a temporary measure. But but when I had him on, he was actually straight. I told him no drama. He was respectful, and
Mhm.
he came up insightful. A side I don't usually see from Ethan and most of his other stuff because it just feels. But I'm saying that in a good way. It says like I felt like I was talking with the real Ethan, not showman Ethan. Which
Well, I think he is a guy. He understands what
mm-hmm.
he's doing, and
Oh yeah,
he's just like Howard Stern understands what he's doing, or some of these other guys that they're on for entertainment, right?
mm-hmm.
Value. That's what he's doing there. And sure, he's promoting his project and he wants to do comics and he's doing comics, but he also understands that his YouTube channel is an entity of itself,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's a certain personality that people expect him to bring
Oh
to
yeah,
that show, and so he does that. But yeah, I've had him on my channel where I actually interviewed him, and
mm-hmm.
it was really great because we just talked about comics and talked about his
Oh yeah,
experiences at DC and different things, and
exactly.
it was a
And I
totally
feel
different environment, you know.
I feel he didn't get to show that side of him that much anymore because so many people are so used to, again, Ethan, comic art pro Ethan, how he is on his channel, which that's how I feel. I feel like you don't show that enough. People start to forget, and they start to let that showman side dominate. It's like when the wrestlers,
Right,
like Vince McMahon. You
right,
start to think Vince McMahon that you see on TV is the real guy,
right,
which I'm certain it's maybe like 50% the real guy.
right, exactly.
I'm not going to say it's nothing like the real guy. I do not even believe that, or it's like Stan Lee.
Yeah,
Smiling Stan, not always how he really was. That's one
right.
thing I always loved about him in Big Bang Theory. We kind of got more to real man Stan there, where he could be an asshole if you
Well,
were to take him off.
everybody can be if they're put in the right position or the wrong position, you know.
Well, like
And
that case, you have a guy coming up to your hotel room in the middle of the night. It's like, get out of here.
yeah, it's like at that point, I'm no longer being a nice guy because you're not acting appropriately. So, and so I
Exactly.
just, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. This is a very sort of it's a very
problem with social
nuanced
media.
thing, and I just think that people like to sort of categorize and attack, and they don't really look at the big picture and what's really going on and why is someone saying what they're saying and why are they doing what they're doing and what's the real goal for doing it.
Oh,
and,
yeah. It's why I feel when I hear people say, oh, they're shoving politics in. I've been more coming to terms saying, I don't think they're shoving it in. I think in their eyes, that there might be one or two who are shoving it in, but for the most part, I think there are those people who feel like they have been assigned this book. They are writing what they can. Unfortunately, when it's a topic that they feel strong about that is political, and unfortunately for some of these people, everything's political, as they like to put it, they can't help themselves and they go overboard with it. Like Tom Taylor, what he's doing with John Kent, I could see that working, but unfortunately some of the stuff he's tapping into, the story stuff, he's just going to give his biased point of view on it. And that's why I look at it like that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, there's always people, they'll argue and say, well, politics have always been in comics, and they have been, but they're usually used as a backdrop to tell a story, not usually the story. And I think that's where maybe more we've seen in modern comics, we've seen more of politics or social politics or however you want to phrase it become the story. And it's like, that's not the story. That should be, you can use that as a backdrop to your story. You can use that to make a point, but it shouldn't be the focus of what, because then it becomes just propaganda at that point.
Exactly.
Right? You're not telling a story anymore. You're trying to propagandize people. And that's not entertainment. That's something different.
And it feels like the opposite is true, though, as well. When you say there's no politics and you want to avoid politics, then sometimes that leads to slugfest, which there's a market for that, but you're not going to get a broad appeal market with just slugfest. It's like Gail put it best. When if you have Superman and the Juggernaut meet up, and she said the fight's not important. That's not important. What led up to it and what happened afterwards is the real story, and that's a belief I've always held on to. Superman versus the Juggernaut, that's the spectacle. That is the big, let the artist do what he wants, bada bing, destruction everywhere. How people react to destruction and what led up to it, that you can see the aftermath afterwards, how that affected them. That's what's important. And I feel some people lose that as well. Some people want to say, I want to avoid, again, they want to avoid politics. They want to avoid, and unfortunately, sometimes that includes just wanting to go for the dumb stuff. And I say dumb in just the popcorn movie stuff is more what I should say. Does that make sense?
You obviously have your characters are what drive your story.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't neglect, who the character is and what they're trying to accomplish when they're not being a superhero. And those things are important, but you have to balance those things so that one doesn't overpower the other. Like you said, if you just have a fight scene, then you basically have a meaningless comic. It might be kind of fun.
Oh yeah, to some people,
but you're not really taking anything away from it. And then if you have something where you totally neglect the superhero elements and just focus on
slice of life and
the reality of their, whatever their personal situation is or political.
Oh yeah, you lose stuff there too. You can appeal to certain people.
Because then it gets boring, right? And no one cares, and people feel like they're being preached to, and they're not being entertained. And so you have to figure out a way to balance those things, because this is ultimately, or it's supposed to be, an entertainment vehicle, and you can't lose sight of that.
That's why I love the 90s era of Superman. Perfect balance. When Mike Carlin was the editor, there was a perfect balance there. You would have the Superman book would be for most of the action. You still have some character stuff. Adventure would be for the supporting characters and everything. I forgot what Man of Steel was described as, but each book represents certain stuff. But since it was constantly leading to the next, it felt like one big story, and you felt like it. You got this bigger picture that I don't think anyone's ever replicated these days anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just felt like no one. Now I get why. I think after Mike Carlin left and you had Jeff Loeb and all that stuff, they didn't want to do that shit. And it's like most writers don't. You needed a Mike Carlin to keep the ship going. Otherwise, most editors don't want to have to put up with that because, it's putting up with a lot of crap.
Well, I think probably a lot of writers, when we see this today, and again, this is just kind of outside gross observation, but you have guys, people want to do what they want to do, right? And I think to a certain degree, I get that creatively, but also when you're dealing with franchised characters, you need sort of a structure and you need someone to kind of hold everything in balance. And I think Mike Carlin did a really good job of that. And you talk about the Superman titles when, of course, Louise Simonson was working on, I think, Man of Steel, and then you had Jurgens working on Superman, and whoever was doing
Terry Ordway and Carl Ketzel and then Roger Stern.
Right, and so you had these guys. They would get together every month. They would talk about where they were going and what parameters the character needed to stay.
That's what led to the death. That's what led to the death was because Lois and Clark said you can't marry them. They ripped it down and said we need something else, and it's like let's just kill him. And they were so salty. They were like, "Yeah, let's do it." I always remember that from the behind the scenes stuff. It was like they flat out said. They were so salty because normally it would be Roger Stern or Jerry Ordway who would just casually say, let's just kill them. There's a joke and they didn't know what to do, how to end. They're like, what happens at the end of the month? Let's just kill them. But Friday they said it. They were so salty. And what did Mike say? Okay, wise guys, if we kill them, what's next? It's just like, okay, I'll challenge you. What if we kill him? What would happen?
Right.
And they finally decided, if we have this opportunity, if we can't marry him off, why don't we go that route? And sure enough, what did we get? We got one of the best stories of all time, if you ask me. The death and the whole thing. I mean, the death wasn't the best part. It was the world without that was the best part.
Right. And then how they brought him back, and of course then you're getting all sorts of great publicity and kind of fueling.
Because it was a slow news day. That's the funniest thing. It was a slow news day, and unfortunately that led to a lot of copycats because they wanted to capture that lightning in the bottle. The only thing that got close was Nightfall, but that was in the works at the same time.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, though, and I just feel like I said, I mean. Sorry, I'm trying to regain my thoughts. But again, when I just hear people just talk about it, it's like for them when I'm writing my characters, I'm not going to have them all be conservatives. I'm going to have there be a couple of people who are varying degrees of on the left and everything. But even then, no, none of them are going to go far left. I am not. I am avoiding that, but they won't. I won't. But I will still have I'm more in the center, more right of center. So at least I have some understanding of, the left. So I try and keep things a bit more of a balance because I feel like you're going to have this group of kids and my characters are a bunch of teenagers. You know what I mean? They're all going to have different, viewpoints and everything. They're not all, because that's why I cannot stand is when people write a group of heroes in unison. It's like, they're a hive mind. You can put that dialogue to anyone else. No, they need to be distinct. It's why you have Hawkman and Green Arrow in the same room. It's like, those two are going to come to blows just because of their politics.
Right.
It's like,
well, and we had. I mean, for the most of the life of this country, everybody's been sort of moderate, right? You've always had people that are conservative and people that are liberal, but they were always willing to come in the middle and say, okay, let's just meet in the middle, and I get a little bit, you get a little bit, and we'll just keep going forward. And that's sort of been how we've functioned successfully for a couple of centuries, and that seems to have gone out the window, at least for the temporarily, hopefully not permanently.
I hope not. I hope not. But that's why I say people always, especially in this community, want to just focus on the one side. I'm like, yeah, but you got to make sure you don't become just as bad because that always happens. And that's what I'm always afraid of happening. And do you have some people who have, not all, but some. And it just feels like we got to keep an eye on that. You can't just ignore it just because they're on your side. So that's why I always feel like that's why I keep myself outside of all of it. I have never been officially Comicsgate. Don't ever plan on it, but I always have a foot right next door to it. It's how I look at it. I am a house that's in between both, both sides, looking at both of them and be like, hey, I'm gonna give my own critique if you guys are want to take it. That's how I look at myself. Not
Well, I think
yeah.
I mean you do the best you can to sort of
Mm-hmm.
navigate. I mean, our again the bottom line should be always the audience, right? Who is your
Mm-hmm.
customer? And you want a big broad of customer base as you can get, right? And so you want to be able to be, yeah,
Republicans buy shoes too, as Michael Jordan put it.
right, exactly. So and I think the way you do that, I mean, I think you have to be honest, and you have to be say this is what I believe or this is what I think. But I think
Mm-hmm.
you want to try and do it in a way that at least you can come to a meeting of the minds with people that
Oh
don't
yeah,
agree with you, and you can at least function with them, right?
and I
And
agree. I agree.
it's just it's a hard proposition right now, like that we've never experienced in our lifetime, and so
Oh yeah.
we're all sort of dealing with uncharted waters here and how to navigate
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing. And so
Definitely,
we'll
and
see. I think we make the best decisions we can, and we go forward and see what happens. I
yep.
mean, sometimes it'll work out, and probably sometimes it won't.
Exactly. Well, and again, thank you so much for coming on. I gotta
Oh,
start
my
wrapping
pleasure.
up. I gotta start wrapping up because I got a phone call that'll be happening about half an hour, so I have to get ready for that. So
Okay,
not a meeting, but more of a personal phone call. So
sure.
again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate
Uh,
you having me on. It was a great pleasure getting a chance to talk about
yep.
comics. I mean, that's where the
Hmm.
fun is, right?
Oh
So
yeah, that's what I love. That's why I try and do this with my show. Regardless, you're the first comic pro I've had on in a long time. Not period, obviously, but in a long time. And it's just been so great to try my new format out with a comic pro and everything. And yeah, again, just thank you so much and good luck with it. I'm gonna try and back your stuff. Money's a little tight, and so I have to
yeah,
make
I
a
understand.
decision. And yep, I just have to make a decision. There's some books that I am definitely like. I feel like they've already earned. Unfortunately, there's some people ahead of you who have earned my bucks. I
Sure.
basically had to
Hey,
put it. So I
you
will
do what you
try.
got to do, man. You do the
Yep.
best you can. You do what you got to do. So
But I
no
promise you
problem.
this.
Thank you
I
for having
will at
me
the
on.
very least. Yep, I will definitely be Amazoning though Garbage Man when it comes out.
Great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yep. So catch you guys all in the next one and see you later.